Chichikov was completely unaware of what was going on. As luck would have it, he had caught a slight chill just at that time and had a sore throat and a gum boil, for the development of which the climate of many of our provincial towns is quite propitious. In order not to end his life, God forbid, without descendants, he decided to remain in his room for 2 or 3 days. During this time, he kept gargling almost uninterruptedly with milk containing a squashed fig. He then ate the fig and applied a compress of chamomile and camphor to his cheek. To while away the time, he made several detailed lists of the peasants he had bought and even read a book written by the Duchess of Lavalier, which he dug up out of his suitcase. Then he went through the various things he had in his box, reread a couple of documents he kept there, and soon grew very bored. He couldn't understand why no one came to inquire after his health. Not a single visit, whereas previously there had almost always been a carriage standing in front of the inn, either the postmasters or the prosecutors or the president's. This puzzled him considerably, and he kept shrugging his shoulders as he paced up and down his room. Finally, he felt better and was indescribably happy that he could now go out and get a breath of fresh air. Without further delay, Chichikov busied himself with his preparations. He poured some hot water into a cup, took a shaving brush and a piece of soap out of his case, and started to give himself a shave, which he realized he needed when he rubbed his hand over his chin. He looked in the mirror and remarked, "Why, look at the forests growing up around here." Although there weren't really any forests, but rather thick crop of whiskers that had sprouted all over his cheeks and chin. Once shaved, he proceeded to dress so hurriedly that he almost leaped into his trousers. Finally, he was completely dressed, sprinkled with eau de cologne, and wrapped up as warmly as possible. He kept the compress on his cheek as a precaution. His first outing, like that of every convalescent, had something joyful and festive about it. Everything he came across seemed gay and smiling, whether it was the house or the passing peasants, although the expressions of some of them were very sour indeed, and there were among them some who had just landed a punch on a neighbor's physiognomy. Chichikov decided that he should make his first visit to the governor. Walking over to the governor's house, many things occurred to him. The thought of the blonde child kept turning over in his head, and his imaginings became somewhat extravagant. He was soon making jokes and laughing at them all by himself. It was in this condition that he reached the governor's residence. He had already begun hurriedly discarding his overcoat in the entrance hall when, unable to believe his ears, he heard the doorman say, "I have orders not to admit you." "What do you mean?" "You probably don't recognize me. Take a good look at my face," Chichikov said to him. "How could I not recognize you? This isn't the first time I've seen you," the doorman said, "and it's you that I've been given orders not to admit. For anyone else, it's all right." "Is it possible? Why? Why is that?" "Those are my orders, and that's the way it is," the doorman said, adding the word, "yes." Then he stood in front of Chichikov in a rather offhand manner, without any show of the affability he used to display in the olden days when he hurried to help Chichikov out of his overcoat. As he looked at Chichikov, he seemed to be thinking, so that's what you are. If the masters are kicking you out of their house, you can't be much of a bargain for sure." "It beats me," Chichikov was thinking, and went off immediately to see the president of the district court. But the president looked most awkward when he saw him and couldn't put 2 words together. Then, when he did start talking, such poppycock poured out that both felt quite embarrassed. After he'd departed, Chichikov tried to make out what the president could possibly have meant, what he might have been driving at, but he couldn't make any sense of it. Then he dropped in on the others, the police chief, the vice-governor, the postmaster, but they all either refused to see him or received him so strangely, with such a constrained air, and spoke to him in such a puzzling fashion, seeming very embarrassed, and the whole thing appeared so incongruous that he began to question their sanity. He tried to see 1 or 2 other people just to get to the root of what was happening, but he wasn't successful. Like a sleepwalker, he stalked the streets of the town, unable to make up his mind whether it was he who had gone mad or the officials who had lost their senses, whether he was dreaming or all this idiotic nonsense was happening while he was wide awake. It was quite late when he returned to the inn he'd left in such a cheerful mood. Out of sheer boredom, he ordered himself some tea. He was deep in thought, following some senseless line of reasoning, when the door of his room suddenly opened, and Nozdrov appeared. You know, there's truth in the saying that distance won't keep two friends apart, Nozdrov said, taking off his cap. I was just going by when I saw the light in your window. Let's go in and see him, I said to myself. I bet he's not asleep. Oh, I'm glad you're having tea. I'll have a cup with pleasure. I ate a lot of rubbish at dinner, and now I feel something starting to stir in my stomach. But first, ask him to fill a pipe for me. Where's your pipe? I don't smoke a pipe, Chichikov said coolly. Rot! I know very well you do. Hey, you! What's that fellow's name? You! Vakreme! Listen here. His name isn't Vakreme. It's Petrushka. What do you mean? I remember you used to have a servant called Vakreme. I never had any Vakreme. Yes, you're right. It wasn't you. It was Derebin. Imagine the stroke of luck Derebin had. His aunt quarreled with her son, who had married a serf girl and transferred her estate to his name. So I've been thinking how nice it would be if I had an aunt like that. But tell me, why haven't you been seeing anyone? Why are you keeping to yourself so much? I know, of course, that you like to dip into learned matters now and then. How Nozdrov had come to the conclusion that Chichikov was interested in learning and in books, we have no idea. And Chichikov had even less than we. You know, friend Chichikov, he went on, if you could have seen, that would have given your satirical mind plenty of food. He didn't explain why or how Chichikov had a satirical mind. Just imagine, my friend, he said. The other day we played cards at Likachev's, the merchant. We all had such a laugh. And Perependiev, who was with me, says to me, I wish Chichikov was here with us. He would have... You know, Chichikov had never heard of any Perependiev before. But, Nozdrov said, you must admit, my friend, you acted like a pig that day, remember? We played checkers. You know very well I'd won. Yes, you welched on me. But then, damn you, I couldn't get angry with you permanently. The other day at the president's... But wait! I must warn you that they're all against you in the town. They believe you're a counterfeiter, and they've been pestering me about it. But then, of course, I stood by you like a rock. And I even told them that we'd gone to school together and that I knew your papa well, and why hide it? I told him a whole yarn about us. What? I'm a counterfeiter, Chichikov cried, rising from his chair. But why'd you have to scare him like that? Nozdrov went on. They all went crazy with fear. Some made a bandit out of you and a spy as well. And the prosecutor, he simply died of fright. And they're burying him tomorrow. Aren't you going? To tell the truth, they're mostly afraid of the new Governor General in case you get them into trouble. Now, what I think of the Governor General is this. If he tries to take on airs with us and to screw up his nose, it'll get him nowhere. Our gentry likes hospitality. You understand? We like to be entertained. Isn't that right? Of course, he can stay in his study and never give us a ball. But what will he achieve by that? But I must say, Chichikov, you're playing a really risky game, you know. What risky game? Chichikov asked, worried. Well, trying to abduct the governor's daughter? I must confess I expected it. I swear I did. The very first time I saw the two of you at the ball, I immediately said to myself, Chichikov won't waste his time for nothing. But to tell the truth, I don't approve of your choice. I see nothing special in her. Now, there's a certain Bikusova, the daughter of the governor's sister. There's something to look at. A walking miracle. But what are you talking about? What's this about abducting the governor's daughter? What is all this? Chichikov said, his eyes popping out. Come on, stop pretending. I know you like to keep things to yourself, but I'll tell you why I really came to see you. I want to help you, see? All right, I'll hold the wedding crown over your head, and I'll provide a carriage and the relay horses, but you must do something for me in return. Lend me 3,000 rubles. You see, my friend, it's a matter of life and death to me. While Nozdrev was chattering away, Chichikov kept rubbing his eyes to make sure the whole thing wasn't a dream. The forgery of paper money, the abduction of the governor's daughter, the death of the public prosecutor he was supposed to have caused, the arrival of a new governor general. It all gave him a considerable fright. Well, if things have gone that far, he reflected, then no more dilly-dallying. I'm getting out of here fast. He got rid of Nozdrev as quickly as he could, called Selifan and told him to have the carriage ready, greased and checked and all that by sunrise, so that they could leave town by 6 the next morning. Selifan said, "Yes, sir," but for some time remained standing motionless by the door. Then Chichikov ordered Petrushka to get his suitcase out from under the bed where it had gathered quite a bit of dust. They started packing without great discrimination. Things were thrown in as they came to hand. Socks, shirts, washed and unwashed linen, boot trees, a calendar. They stowed it all in quite haphazardly, as Chichikov insisted that they be ready before turning in, so as to avoid any delay in the morning. After spending a couple of minutes standing by the door, Selifan left the room, and very slowly at that. As slowly as could possibly be managed, he walked downstairs, leaving the wet imprints of his thick boots on the worn, battered steps, while his hand lengthily scratched the nape of his neck. What did this scratching imply, and what does it generally imply? Was it disappointment at having to miss a planned drinking spree in some corner tavern with a fellow coachman in a shabby, belted sheepskin coat? Or was he sad that he had to cut short a love affair that had sprouted in this new town and would be forced to give up his nightly lounging in a gateway? Would no longer feel the delicate pressure of white hands as the darkness thickened over the town, and a strapping, red-shirted fellow strummed away on his balalaika before the assembled servants, while people of all walks of life relaxed after the day's work, quietly talking to one another? Or perhaps it was simply reluctance to leave a warm spot by the kitchen stove where he'd slept, covered by his sheepskin coat, in the close neighborhood of the cabbage soup and the succulent town-made pies, and to resume his endless travels through rain, sleet, and all the hardships of the road. The scratching of the nape of the neck means all sorts of things among the Russian people.